Thank you for being here. Sorry, we had this system doesn't like Windows 11, so just updated last night. I'm an update. So we just roll with the punches. But thank you for being here. As she stated, my name is Joshua V. Barr, and I am the founder, president, and chief strategist of Raising the Bar LLC. Prior to that, I was I'm a recovering attorney, first of all. But as an attorney, I was the State Fair Housing Director for the state of South Carolina, as well as the staff attorney. And then I migrated here to Iowa, where I was the Director of Civil and Human Rights for the city of Des Moines for about 6 years. During that time, we won an Emmy for a documentary we did entitled Breaking Bread, Building Bridges. Then we was also named number 5 of the top out of 50 of the top local government influencers. And then last year, right before I departed, I was named one of the top 50 executives in the United States by NBA Magazine. I'm also a vegan, so it's really been difficult here in Iowa. So, I'm happy to be here. And we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about, in this case, we're going to talk about equity in housing. But before we talk about that, let's kind of talk about where we are, what we're doing. So, is this y'all's first conference since the pandemic? First for anybody? I see some head shaking. Some people saying no, some people saying yeah. So, congratulations. But there's a new wave that's on the way. Hopefully not, but we hope for the best. But we're in a weird time. The society has shifted in many shape, forms, and fashion. COVID-19 revealed a lot of cracks in the system. Then in the midst of the pandemic, after you had already watched Tiger King and been through all the shows you can see on Netflix and Disney Plus, then George Floyd was murdered. And that kind of sparked some awareness in people who thought we were long past these things, others who knew we definitely weren't past these things. And you had protests worldwide in the midst of both economic opportunity. This photo below is from Bogota, Colombia. I spent a few years living in Colombia, South America, but they were in protest because the opportunities that they were lacking in businesses being shut down because of the pandemic. 65% of people that live in Colombia have what are deemed informal jobs, not corporate, but street vendors, etc. And so they were protesting about shutting all that down. When you shut down people being able to vend on the streets, how can I make money? Especially if you aren't giving me any opportunities or checks or food sent to my house in the midst of the pandemic. So here in a different time. So now, this was a global issue. Racism was a global issue. So was the pandemic. But I just want to bring it back home real quick, do a quick non-scientific survey. So just by a show of hands, I'm just going to do a quick survey. Now, when it comes to our state, our country, just show of hands. How many people say everything works just fine? Show of hands. Show of hands. I've been doing this for like almost 2 years, and nobody raised their hand. All right. Number 2, needs a little tweaking, but otherwise works great. All right. Got some. Thank you. Got a few hands. Thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Number 3, in need of some reform. All right. All right. So that's close to about half of the room. Close. And then number 4. Needs a major overhaul. All right, so the 3s have it, but all of you, in some shape, form, or fashion, says that we got some work to do. Even if you said it needs a little tweaking, well, wait, it needs some work. All of you are admitting that there is some work we have to do. Now, some people are talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that's part of the process, people are saying. But let's dive into it for a moment. So, how many of y'all seen company photos that look like this? Yeah, and y'all laughing, so that means that, what's the laughter? Somebody tell me, when you see a photo like this, what do you think?
Melted pot.
All right, got melted pot, and then somebody said staged over here. All right. Anything else?
Tokenism.
Tokenism, all right. Yeah, you like it staged, tokenism. Now, again, having 3 degrees, which means I have a lot of student loan debt. But I had to take some of these photos sometimes. And and then typically when I try to take the photo, if I'm standing on the outside like this guy, no, Josh, we need to get towards the center. Like, yeah. John around. And so I've been part of these photos. But the question is it real? Or is this just something, an image that we're trying to portray? Because everybody's got smiles and everybody looks so friendly. Even somebody in their own cultural dress that is probably different from traditional American dress. But the question is that reality? Is that the reality that we live in? So I got just a quick quiz question. So when we think about diversity in and of itself creates what?
Inclusion.
Somebody said inclusion. Anything else? Some people over here are shaking their heads, so they agree with you. Anything? When you think about diversity creates what?
Creativity.
Creativity, all right. Anybody else? Let it flow, so. Fairness, all right. Opportunity, I hear that one a lot. Creativity, opportunity, I hear that, yes. Anything else? One more round. Heard somebody whispering over here. Okay, they don't want to say it. All right. Now, diversity in and of itself creates nothing. Now, what do I mean by that, though? Because we say our strength is in our diversity. But if you don't actually tap into the diversity, the differences in people, their creativity, the ideas that they have in their brain, it actually means nothing. We want you to just conform to a system, and we don't care about any idea, thought, creativity you have. So to get that opportunity, you actually have to tap into these people and the things that they bring to the table. To get that fairness, you have to make sure that all of their voices are being heard, and that certain people don't have invisible or informal power over others simply because of their gender, their sex, their race, etc. So diversity doesn't mean anything unless you actually are willing to include them in the process. And I say that because sometimes I see politicians, I believe in diversity. I believe in diversity. But diversity is just a fact. I never see them. I believe in air. Air. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I believe in air. Tables are real. You don't have to say that because it's already true. We're one of the most diverse countries in regards to race that there is. And we don't have to believe in diversity because it's just a fact. But the question is, what are we actually doing with it? Is what you do with diversity that matters. But if you just want people to come in, conform, shut up, spend the best part of their day, 8 hours while the sun is out, just doing what you tell them to do, that's not diversity. It's definitely not inclusion, and it's definitely not equity. So, sometimes when we think about diversity and equity, which is more so like this, but there's this big wall that's keeping certain people out, and hey, I'm over here, I got these beautiful ideas and all these things, but no, stay over there. Is that more so reality? And when we talk about inclusion, It's inclusion into what? And that's important, and something we're going to talk about a bit today. And I appreciate your participation. We'll be doing more things as we go about. But when we talk about inclusion, it's inclusion into what? If it's a system and a process and an institution that is unfair to certain people, whether you are a woman, whether you are a person of African descent, whether you are not born in the United States, do I really want to be included in that process? Or do we need to transform that process? And that's the thing. Now, does anybody play sports? We say practice makes what? All right. Now, first thing we're going to share today is perfection does not exist. Practice makes better. You can always better your best, no matter what you're doing. And I have to say that more so today, because I was just reading a report last night that this new generation, while they are successful, they have a fear of trying certain things, especially in the workplace, because they are afraid of making mistakes. And as someone who has hired a number of people, especially people younger than me now that I'm 40, I get into the traffic and I'm just like, apprehensive. I'm like, look, I'm the one person you can work with who actually make a mistake. I want you to make mistakes because I want you to fail forward and understand that perfection doesn't exist. I need you to get started. The only way you really improve is actually getting started first. And so we have to actually break these myths. Practice makes perfect. There's no such thing as perfection. I was always looking for the perfect girl. I didn't find it. Now I'm married, my wife's here. But she's not perfect. Now I'm probably get in trouble for that later. But just gotta break reality. You're not perfect. And neither am I. And she's like, yeah, you're not perfect. Quick. So we have to have these conversations. Now, I won't go through all of this to the extent I probably should, just for the sake of time. But, you know, diversity is just the who. The people that we're talking about. Now, you had someone come up earlier and talk about in regards to housing ownership. 76% European American, 23% African American. Home ownership in Ireland. So there is this big gap in regards to why isn't a certain group owning as many homes as possible. So the diversity of that is the who. The inclusion is the what. That is leveraging differences to increase contributions and opportunity for all. What are we trying to do? And you look at those things through data. Equity is the so what. How are we going to include people? That's through policies and practices. And then there's intercultural competence. That's the how. Well, and that's how to shift your cultural perspective in order to grow. And as someone who's lived out of the country for a few years, I had to increase my cultural competence to adapt to an environment where I didn't come in with the American exceptionalism viewpoint, which I did have for a first year. But I had to adapt my behavior to different cultural contexts in order to really understand the people I was living with, engaging with, and eating food with. So, but before we can get there, and I see a lot of people that teach DI work, but they really don't understand US history. Because if you don't understand history, you'll keep making the same mistake over and over and over and over again, wondering why aren't things getting better? But you gotta know where you're coming from in order to know where you're trying to go. The great civil rights leader Diana Ross said, do you know where you're going to? Do you like the things that life is showing you? Where are you going to? But you can't know that unless you know where you're coming from. But you know, as a person who has been working with a therapist for the past year and a half, and I only put myself in therapy just to reveal it, because one day I was talking to my wife, and I was like, you need therapy. Well, why don't you get therapy? I said, I don't need therapy, I'm moving. moving forward, advancing in my life. I don't need therapy. And then in the back of my head, I was like, gosh, that was a really hubristic statement to say, you probably need therapy. I just can't be that confident. I don't need therapy. I'm perfect. Perfection does not exist. And so, but working with my therapist, you know, one of the things I've learned through the process is that progress only happens when you start to tell the truth, when you start to be honest with yourself about what's happening in your life and where you're trying to get to and why you hold on to certain things and why certain things hold you back, etc. But you have to be honest. If you really want to advance in life, you got to be honest with yourself. And as someone who's always, since I'm an 80s baby, Enter the Dragon changed my life. One of my favorite movies of all time. I want a Bruce Lee body. Not there. But I had to be honest, I don't like working out. It sucks to me. It's just hard. It's just not something I'm used to. But I had to have the why don't I like working out? Well, what is that? And I had to have this is a whole nother conversation. I'm not going to tell you why, but it's going to go down a long rabbit hole. But to get there, to understand what was stopping me, I had to have this honest dialogue with myself. And part of that dialogue has helped me to actually be more physically active over the past few months. I had to understand, first of all, willpower ain't gonna get you anywhere. It's habits that really build you to get you somewhere. Willpower is as weak as a muscle that you really tap into once you actually start moving. Action leads to motivation, which leads to inspiration, or action leads to inspiration, which leads to motivation, excuse me. But that's neither here nor there. So we're gonna talk a little bit about US history. Because I know that it's very important, especially for realtors, and we'll talk about why it's important to you all as we move through this. Because one of the main things we're going to talk about is property, is land. And why is that so important? So, let's start here. Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Those include life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Now, this at the time in European culture, Western European culture, was very revolutionary because traditionally who stood at the top of the European hierarchy, if you know history at this time here? Who was number one?
King.
Actually, it was one person above the king.
God.
Or a person. Pope, somebody said it. Pope. It was the Pope. Then the king, then God. In most Western, it's different. Spain, especially Portugal, Pope was number one. And the Pope granted powers to the king, which is, if you want to understand how the Atlantic slave trade got started, Henry the Navigator, Prince of Portugal, and he was actually not a sailor, so I don't know why they call him Henry the Navigator. But he sent some of his men off to Africa to find some gold, etc. They ran into some men that were selling, and they kidnapped them, people of African descent, and they took them back to Portugal and gave them to Prince Henry as a gift. This was in 1442, before Columbus sailed the ocean blue. And 1441, excuse me. But Prince Henry had to ask for permission. Can we enslave these people? And Eugene IV, the Pope, said, yes, they are heathens. We can take their land and we can enslave them. But what really started the slave trade was one of the people who was a chief that wanted to kidnap his son. He said, look, if you let me go, I will actually go back to my lands and find other people for you to enslave. And so as a deal to free himself, they started enslaving other Africans, giving them to Spain, Portugal, and later on England, etc. That's actually the start of the slavery, just in case you didn't know. That was before Columbus landed. But the Pope had to approve it. You can take their lands, You can enslave them because they are not of us. But the Bible says thou shalt not what? Steal. They violate their own rule. Right there. He said there was no laws here. Yeah, but you all came here, you claim to be Christian nations. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear a false witness. Violated all of that. Now, that wasn't my point. That went on. All right. Now, there is one word here that is actually a word that we've been still fighting over to this day in this statement right here. Anybody take a guess at which word that is? Like what? What?
Equal.
Men. That's the word. That's the word. That's the word that's still in. It's been used. Who was he talking about when he wrote this? Now, when he originally wrote this, who was he talking about? Y'all need to be. Let's be real specific here. Let's be real specific here.
Rich, English, white.
Yes, yeah. We'll take both of those. Yeah, that's it. Like when we talk, let's talk specifics. Because when you tell somebody I love you, like how? Now, boy, that's what I say. How do you love me? Show me. Let's get specific here. So I was like, man, no, that's not true. And when they say women got the right to vote in 1920, that's actually not true. Only one group of women got the right to vote. Anybody take a guess which group of women that was? White women. Yeah, the women got the right to vote. No. Everybody else had to wait till 1965. Not 1919. We had to talk real quick, so I appreciate that extra clarity there. Because when we talk, we have to talk in specifics, or people get confused. What's wrong with you? You got the right to vote. No, that was 1965. Now, so, that word has been in controversy. When he originally wrote it for English, Anglo-Saxon, white, land-owning, rich people. That's the only people he was talking about. He wasn't on nobody else. He wasn't talking about women. He wasn't even talking about white women, but they reap the secondary benefits. We doing all this for you, baby. Can I vote now? Slow down. All right. So, that word has been in controversy, and people keep trying to fall into men. If you actually pay attention, I believe it was 2015 when the Supreme Court finally okayed, it might be 2014 when the Supreme Court finally said that same-sex marriage is legal under the Constitution. It actually came back to this and talked about men and how that right should include this group of people as well. So we have to be specific. So Thomas Jefferson is an interesting case because he wrote that all men are created equal and endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. But Thomas Jefferson was also a what? Slave owner. All men are created equal. Am I not a man? Am I not a brother? Nah. But so understand there's some contradiction in there. And I'm pretty sure, again, talking specifics, if I bought Thomas Jefferson in a time machine today to the future, he'd go back and we gotta be real clear what we're talking about. A black guy took me in a time machine to the future where a female is vice president and she's of Indian and Jamaican descent. Oh my gosh. And somehow my cousin is president. No. So, all right. So, but that's what he said. He was a slave owner who wasn't even practicing what he preached and what he wrote. And again, we have to, I like to think about thought-terminating cliches. And, people say, we're all equal. But let's talk about that word for a minute. Are we really all equal? Is that what you really meant? Like, is everybody 6'5" like me? Although I'm 6 feet, I'm not 6'5". All right. No, we don't even have the same, we different heights. We got different thoughts and opinions. Different shapes, sizes, etc. He was just saying nobody is better. When he's writing this to King George, he's saying you aren't better than me just because you're king. And that's really what he was trying, that's the statement he was really trying to make, is you're not better than me. And then in the civil rights movement, we're saying you're not better than me because you don't have the amount of melanin that I have. And that's the point we're really striving to drive. Now, Thomas Jefferson, when he talks about racism, slavery, he says, it was a question of should we let these people go? And Thomas Jefferson, after he had left the presidency, said, as it is, we have the wolf by the ear, and we can neither hold him safely nor let him go. Justice is in the one scale and self-preservation is in the other. Now the justice wasn't letting the enslaved people of Africa go. He actually knew it was the right thing to do, but his fear was, if I let them go, what's going to happen?
No workforce.
No, that's not what he's saying. He said a wolf by the ear.
They might come back and revolt.
Yes, that's what he said, a wolf by the ears. He's worried they're going to come back and take everything and kill us and get us back for what we've done to them. Now, some of y'all lived through the 60s and 70s, and pretty sure most of us lived through the 80s, but there might be some people that are 90s babies as well here. Okay, yeah, that's the 90s baby here, all right? But, now, since the enslaved Africans were freed in 1865, has there been this great revolt? We just went around killing people, and has it happened? Now, this is unfounded. He was just so afraid. And a lot of people still hold a fear similar to this. Well, what happens if we actually do this? Or what happens if we try to pay and say, oh, no, we can't do it. This is unfounded fear. And there's a lot, and fear, if you understand what it actually stands for, fear actually stands for false evidence appearing real. There is no evidence that typically the fear in your head is bigger than reality. How many of y'all done something, you're like, oh my God, my dad is gonna kill me. How many of y'all still alive after that? All of y'all. Doesn't happen. I know I had a thought, man, oh my God, no. I'm still here. But we paint this bigger picture. Stop me from asking out the girl I always wanted to ask out in high school. Oh, she's gonna turn me down. And me like, oh, you know, I would've went out. Always bigger in your head than actual reality. So, when we talk about America is a unique place. And we have to have the conversation. Well, shouldn't we be past racism? Well, you can't get past anything you actually don't address. And that's the issue. When we talk about America, we don't want to talk about racism. Now, as someone who is in a relationship, and I walk in the door and I'm saying, hey babe, how you doing? Hey, fine. Now, how many of y'all think I should ignore that? It's fine. She said she's fine. I should just show her hand. She said she was fine, move on. All right, everybody, I should not ignore that. What should I do? When she's fine, I'm fine. What should I do?
What's
What's the matter? Diabetes. I said everything's fine. Next.
Is it really fine?
Is it really fine? Talk to me, I'm here for you. I made dinner, you wanna talk, babe? Now, what I typically do is, this is my mistake. Typically I'll be like, all right, well, she said she good, all right. Then later on, baby, can you pass her? You know, I just hate when you do. What's wrong to talk about? We ignore these issues till they blow up in our face over and over again, both in our homes, but especially as a society when it comes to dealing with the issue of race, we just ignore it. You know, they took down the flag in South Carolina, everything's good down there. They don't address the deeper issues because we live in a capitalist economic society where we have stolen land built by stolen people. It's about economics. And so when you're not dealing with the core issues of economic opportunity, these issues are always going to repeat themselves. But again, you know, the way you really, I mean, I'll talk about it later, but when we dive into this, you have to understand, prior to the inception of this country, race has been a part of it. And even when you think about America, you can't even spell America without word. I am race. It's in our DNA. It's in the spelling of the word. I am. It's a part of who we are. It's in the DNA, both figuratively and literally, and what we're dealing with. And so we have to have the harder conversation. So let's move a little further. Just to make sure I'm good on time. But let's advance to the Civil War. Now, Civil War, you have General Sherman down in the South going through and burning down cities in Georgia and South Carolina, even the city I lived in, Columbia. And when they were doing that, the enslaved Africans started to follow the Union soldiers. And finally, they said, we got to do something about this because we didn't plan on this happening. Like, we didn't plan on them following us. So they finally met with the African pastors and said, what can we do about all of these persons that are following? What do we do to support you? Them and Secretary of War Stanton, you see Sherman and Stanton right here, and the rest of 20 African pastors. Reverend Garrison Frazier spoke on behalf of the ministers and essentially requested that the government should give the freedmen, that's what they call them, their rights, and the government should protect their rights and should let them alone and let them be citizens. And he further states that the way we can best take care of ourselves is to have land. And we can soon maintain for ourselves something to spare. We want to be placed on land until we're able to buy it and make it our own. Now after that, General Sherman came out with Special Field Order 15, which set aside 400,000 acres of land dedicated to the enslaved Africans who had worked those lands, and gave them a mule as well, the leftover Union mules. That was called 40 acres and a mule, and ultimately led up to the setup of the Freedmen's Bureau, which was designed to bring formerly enslaved Africans, about 4 million, into society. Now, that didn't last very long, because as this South Carolina planner said, after the freeing of the Africans, there is now nothing between me and the nigger but the almighty dollar, the almighty dollar. And I shall make out of him the most I can at the least expense. This was written in a journal right after the Civil War. You say I gotta treat him equal, okay. All right, well, I can't enslave them, but I definitely ain't gonna pay them very well. Now, that's stated. Now, again, I worked and I've lived in South Carolina most of my life. First 27 years, that's where I was, and I left. I came back and worked there as a professional. And I used to work for the state. And this was 2014, 2015. And when I was working, I had some full-time secretaries that were making about $21,000 a year. This is 2015. And just in case you don't know, government, both in the South and in the federal level, has actually a disproportionate number of African Americans that work there. And I mean that in a positive way, if you look at it that way, where they are based on their population, is like double, sometimes triple the amount of the population, the population of either the state or even on the federal level. So they take up a big number. But in the South especially, you still paying people $21,000 in a government job, getting the most I can out of these people at the least expense. And then I ain't talking McDonald's. Oh, they should get another. Well, I work for the government, and they pay me worse than McDonald's. So this is the mindset that happened after the Civil War, and many people still haven't broken this mindset. Trying to get the most out of people at the least expense. But the good thing, part of the pandemic, woke people up. I don't want to just be a hamster in a wheel. My life has value, it has worth. I'm a human being, and I want to be treated with dignity and respect. And a number of people have said, you know what, I quit. And some of them actually became real estate agents. So, and I say that, I know somebody actually did that. So, So we're still dealing with this mentality of trying to work people. And a lot of that is based on discrimination. And what do I mean? 1965, 1968, Civil Rights Act started to be implemented. And the doors start to open. Not just for people of African descent, but people of all races. But also women as well. But as the door starts to open for people, wages stay stagnant and have remained stagnant to this day. If you look at the output of the country, it does not pay fairly to what people are actually producing. If we were actually paying people a living or fair wage, it would be about $23 an hour based on the output of this country. But we don't do that. Why? Because that's helping women, that's helping African American, Latinos, and all these other groups. And you know, that wasn't, the wages and the output was moving together until the door opened. That's actually fact. But let's keep moving. I want to talk about property. So, as the Civil War was happening, another thing was happening. Lincoln was doing the Homestead Act. Homestead Act was giving land to people of European descent. Now, you may hear me say European and African way more than black and white, and there's a reason for that. Because when I went to school back in the day, teachers said, I want each student to get a crayon and draw pictures of their family. And the so-called white students reached for what color? What color did y'all reach for? Peach. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the honesty. Peach, that's exactly the color you went for. And so-called black students reached for what color? Brown. Oh, why you ain't even white? Hey, Pete, chase these people. How you doing, man? But y'all didn't even reach for that. So I really strive to talk really specific. Now, there's a white culture in America and a black culture in America, and so you may hear me use those words too. Most times when I'm talking about people and individuals, I say European, I say African, European American, African American. Because these colors were actually put in by design. White stood for pure, black stood for evil. And so I'm really trying to be really specific when I deal with people. Very. So in this case, why do you saying I did an interview once in the government. You keep saying European. Are you talking about Bosnians? Like, no, I'm talking about you. Oh, okay. All right. So, Homestead Act gave land, again, it started in the Civil War. If they stayed on the land and improved it, stayed on it for 5 years, this land was given to them. They had to pay a small fee and this land was given to them. And the final claim happened in 1988. Now, in case you're curious about which lands, is actually some of the lands you're standing on right now. Lands west of the Mississippi, which includes Iowa. So, and I gave this presentation once to talk about this, and I actually had a person say, hey, yeah, my ancestors actually were part of the Homestead Act, and the land we have is part of that. So the lands that we're on, which originally did not belong to us, any of us, unless you are of indigenous descent, was given away by the government, but people already lived here. And so we have to understand land is intrinsic to American progress. But that was denied to African Americans. They actually had to move into what was called sharecropping, where, because again, General Sherman gave that land, but Lincoln was assassinated. Andrew Johnson from Tennessee became president and said that, you know what, if the people who rebelled against the United States just write me an apology letter, I will give them their land back. Now, if that's all the president required of you to do to get your land back, how did they do it writing that letter like really fast? I'm so sorry, President Johnson. I did not mean to rebel. We hold this state and I please give my land back. Thank you, Deputy. So, that's exactly it. So the land that was given to those Africans, the Unions had to come back and say, hey guys, sorry, you gotta get off. What are you talking about? No, President Johnson. So they gave the land right back. And so they had to enter into sharecropping agreements where if they worked the land that they used to be enslaved on, working with the former enslaver, then they would get a share of the profits. Now, what happened was they worked the land, and then when the profits came, oh, well, you know, you borrowed my mule, and well, prices were really high. Remember the seeds? You know, we can't give you that, you know. So you actually owe me money, and now you got to work another year to pay me off, pay me back. And so the cycle was going on and on and on. Now, just in case you didn't know, sharecropping continued on into the 80s and 90s in some parts of the South, Mississippi, Alabama, etc. So it's not like it went away. It happened for a very long time. You can actually watch some documentary people who finally got out of their sharecropping agreement back in the 90s. And all the money that the family made, the white family made, that did not share with the people in their generations of family who worked the land. This is a generation, 90s. Most y'all are alive, living history. Now, and you know, if you've ever seen the movie Selma, or understand what happened, where people were fighting for their voting rights and trying to get the voting rights and crossing the bridge and getting beaten by Alabama state troopers. You know, finally, the voting rights bill was signed by President Lyndon Johnson. Celebration, jubilee. Now all women can get the right to vote, and men of darker hues that were denied the right, given to it during the 15th Amendment, but about 9 years later taken away, now had their rights restored to vote under the 15th Amendment, which was already in power but just wasn't being enforced. Now, that's a pretty story, but guess what happened to the people in those towns in Alabama and Mississippi who stood up for their rights? Those sharecropping owners said, well, you got the right to vote, but you got to get off my land. Kicked them all off their land, the land that they had been living on for generations, through both prior to, during enslavement and post-freedom. They were kicked out of their lands and had to live in tent cities where the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, put up some tents and gave them the ability to live there. There's actual photo. There's actually a national park dedicated to tent cities very close to Selma, if you ever take the trip, talking about where the actual land they lived on. And during the course of that time, they had to get all their belongings overnight. Because if you didn't, you had to get out, and they were forced to live on these lands. And white people would drive by shooting, sometimes go in and loot, beat people up. And this is 1965, by the way. And by the way, at this time, my mother is she's 15 years old. My mother's still alive today. My father was 15 years old. So this is living history. Just in case you don't know, Fred Gray, who was Martin Luther King's attorney, still alive today, working at his law firm in Tuskegee, Alabama. Saw him 2 years ago. So this is living, this ain't ancient history. Some of y'all were alive in 1965. So these are opportunities where land is being taken away or being dangled over people. And I'm pretty sure most of you have heard about World War II and the granting of land to European American soldiers, which was denied to every other group, most of the people in every other racial background. And that was a game changer. World War II is one of the biggest life-changing events in regards to globalization. But when opportunity is being given to some, others are being denied that opportunity. These GI Bills only going to a certain group of people that fall. And that caused a shift, because prior to, many groups, Irish, Italian, Polish, Jewish, they tried to stay very cultural. But when money is being given out, mortgages is being given out, it's only given out to white people. How do you do that? I'm white. Lose your accent. Some people change their last name in order to get access to certain things. But, you know, I ain't have, my family didn't have Michael Jackson money to change color of skin, so we are marked. There's no name change I can do. There's nothing I can do, because the federal government is giving out loans to certain groups of people and denying it to others. And many of these places, like Levittown, are still heavily segregated today. Even though these loans and these towns were being built back in the 1940s and 50s, the legacy still lives on when you don't address the underlying issue. So, let's get through that. So, when you fail to address the ghosts of the past, it always comes back in present day. Now, I don't know if you know this, but this photo at the top right is taken in 2015, and the photo right here is taken in 1965 in the top right here. Almost the same identical photo 50 years later. Have we really come as far as we think we have? The technology has advanced. Now I can FaceTime my mother right now and say, hey mom, how you doing? You didn't take out the trash last time you was here. Sorry mom, all right, so. But have we really evolved as human beings? And some people will say, well, Joshua, life just isn't fair. Now, you're right, nature is not fair, but human beings can be. But I like it. We like to say these thought terminating, life isn't fair. You can actually evolve and make it fair, but you have to actually have the desire to do so. So, let King talk a bit. Everybody loves to talk about his dream, but King actually has some stuff to say about property rights and land ownership as well. Talk to him, King.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today, many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. This is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
All right, so as King talked about the Homestead Act that I mentioned. Now, most people just think that he had a dream and then ascended into heaven and never to be seen again, but King actually lived for another 5 years after that I Have a Dream speech. We don't talk about those 5 years at all. Not in school. I know this to be fact because I go and talk to people in colleges and seniors in high school, 11th graders, and I say, how many of y'all been hearing about Martin Luther King every February? And one day in January. Now, what different have you learned about Martin Luther King from first grade to being a senior in high school? Most people say, I haven't learned anything different. Every day I just learned, he had a dream, and I'll show y'all a funny video, but where kids are like, he freed the slaves. Like, no, he didn't. Literally, it's like a video, right? But I have time for it. But we don't talk about those 5 years. But King's going to tell us a little bit more later about those 5 years. But we have to have that hard conversation. For 200-something years, we had affirmative action for people of European descent. And it all of a sudden ended at the end of the 1960s because the door opened for everybody else. Equality, you have to be fair to everybody. But when you talk about fairness, fairness is about doing what's right, not what is equal. We'll talk about that in a moment. So let's go to modern day. Let's stay in 2020 and to now. And when we talk about modern day, we have to talk about, again, property. Because again, this country was built, stolen land, built by stolen people. That's the founding of this country. And we're still dealing with land access issues. So, for example, these are just some news headlines that I found randomly as I was getting ready to do this presentation. And you see where people are having to change photos in their house and have friends who are of European descent sit in the house and put their photos up with their family in order to get a fair appraisal for their home. You're seeing people, Wells Fargo report just came out last week. 53% of the people of African descent who apply for loans with Wells Fargo are denied. And many of these same people are qualified or just as qualified as the Europeans who apply for the same homes. A judge, literally just yesterday, I found this one last night when I should have been asleep, found that she had probable cause for discrimination over a lowball appraisal. An appraisal shot up 1.4 million% when a white person stood in as the owner. All of a sudden, I have a match. And this is happening all around the country. I said, that's just, those places. But no, this is real stuff. And it's actually happening. This couple right here is attached to that first top news article where people are being denied. But again, that's the appraiser. That's not us. We're real estate stuff. So let's talk about y'all. All right. Now, there's a great documentary that came out in 2018. It's called Testing the Divide. It's by Newsday in New Jersey. It's only 38 minutes. And they, for 3 years, conducted some tests in regards to Long Island, New York, trying to see what opportunities would be given to persons when they applied to get housing. And what they uncovered was that there was unequal treatment by real estate agents. In regards to that, 19% of the time, Asians were either given different housing options, are told, are denied service. Persons of Latin American background, 39% of the time were treated differently than the European American tenants who applied. And for African Americans, 49%, either they were given were denied service or told that certain houses were available and they were given. That's a really interesting data. 3 years they did this. They did inquiries into 5,600 properties over a 3-year period. And they found in most cases there was different treatment all around. There was only, in the video, it might have been more, but there were only like 2 real estate agents who were consistent across the board in Long Island, New York. Consistent across the board. And so that means that something's going on. You might be like, Joshua, that's New York, that's not us. Now, I showed this to my team, trying to demonstrate fair housing discrimination still happening. I had 2 employees. One was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed European girl, very nice, 2 kids, married. And another was a Mexican-American girl. Both worked for me at the time that I showed in this documentary. And by the time the documentary ended after 40 minutes, they were just sitting there with their mouths just. And I was like, what is going on here? They both had the European American female was telling me, when we came to the Des Moines area after living away for about a few years, we tried to get a home in Des Moines. We wanted to live in Des Moines proper. And the real estate agents, wouldn't you feel so much better in Waukee? And she kept trying to cater us to Waukee. We're like, oh, we want to live in Des Moines. It's like, no, Waukee is such a great area. Now, in case you don't know, Waukee is affluent European American area. And they were literally trying to shuffle us there. And we actually had to get another agent and say, look, we do not, and like, they had to deal with 2 that, look, we don't want to live in Waukee. This is where we want to live. Person of Mexican descent said that when her family was trying to get a place, they kept saying, the east side of Des Moines is so great. Literally a different extent. They kept trying to say, they tried to stick them to the east side. And eventually, they got so frustrated with the project, they just bought a house on the east side. But they wanted to see all the city, but all they were given were things on the east side. And just in case you don't know, the east side of Des Moines is poorer and darker, just in case you didn't know. And they were sitting there like, wow, this literally happened to us by real estate agents in Iowa. They were just floored that this was actually happening to them, one in a so-called positive way, living in Waukee amongst your kind, and the other one, they deemed it a negative way, living on the east side of Des Moines amongst your kind. And my challenge is, are y'all doing the same things? And I say that because further research demonstrates that average home search takes about 12 weeks, and people look at about 12 different homes based on the research. However, people of African descent are told about almost 20% fewer homes and are shown 20% fewer homes. So that means your options are limited. They don't tell you about certain. If you actually watch the Newsday documentary, you see it literally happen in real time. Are there homes available? Oh no, there's nothing available here. White lady walks, oh, there's some great homes here. Yeah, they're beautiful, wonderful. And literally, same day. Like, why are you showing people different stuff? And of course, I'm not racist. But when you're shown fewer opportunities, when you're told about fewer opportunities and shown fewer opportunities, it's harder to find your dream. It actually takes you more time. And that's time you could be spent doing more creative things with your time. Time is a very precious thing. And unfortunately, most of us now spend it on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. But time is a very precious thing. And when I have to spend time and I'm being given a loop to run around because you don't think I belong over here, or as the slide demonstrates, the more African Americans and many times Latinos are starting to move into the community, the property value starts to go down. Now, when you have these issues, you know, oh, that's the market. The market. But the market is made of people, appraisers, who are given lower values when the home is owned by someone of African. The market isn't some invisible hand, as Adam Smith would say, we're talking about capitalism. It's actually made of people. And the people demonstrated that if you have a dark group, we put a lower value in you today, not yesterday, today. And I can use property values to demonstrate that. Now, but this is the harder conversation that we have to have. And my question to you is, are you gatekeepers to upholding racist principles of the past? That's something you have to ask yourself. Am I acting like these real estate agents that were in New York? And again, I'm pretty sure if we did the same thing, especially after the reaction of my two employees when I showed them documents, we would probably get the same results. I am 100% certain. Because most cities are a microcosm of things that happen on a larger scale in this country. Most cities. And so we have to have that harder are you keeping certain people out because of who they are, what they look like? And there's also studies again of women who, when they try to buy a home, they're actually given a higher price to pay their premium just for being a woman. So this isn't just about race. Women suffer too, and let me make sure I'm clear. White women suffer too. All right, I have to say that. No, white women suffer too. All right. So, now, I just want to make sure I'm clear. I want to bring this point on. How do you see people? Are you looking at certain groups of people as subhuman? Now, so this is a diversity and inclusion promotion in 2019 by the University of Missouri. And they were so excited. They put all these tweets and had these posters on their campus. We love diversity, diversity, look at us. But what do you notice about this promotion? Tell me something. Somebody, what do you see? What do you notice?
Your African Americans don't have a future.
Yeah, okay. Now, that's how it, so just in case you want to give a more background, to promote this diversity, they were given video interviews of student athletes by the NCAA student athletes. They were telling us, most of the clips are about 5 minutes, they're talking about themselves, what they want to do. And then the marketing person makes a poster, they take a photo and they make a poster and put a slogan up, taking a portion of what they said and put it up. Now, these are just a few of them, but if you saw it, all the Europeans have a future. Future doctor. Future company. You? Oh, you're an African American woman. Yeah! And you, Martin Luther King, black, you must believe in equality. Yeah, that sounds good. Now, there's nothing wrong with being an African American woman. But the thing is, historically, if you always see me as subhuman, you don't see a future in me. And they actually had to go back and tear down on the Twitter, just tore him up. It was really bad. I saw it before Twitter. I said, oh my God, that's bad. And Twitter just, I can't see this. You know, it got so bad, you woman, I'm a brother. Come on. Come on. Come on. And y'all give me these crows, but some of y'all and your cousins might make the same mistake. Seeing futures and these other people talking about their life, what they want to do. Other people talk, oh, you're an African American woman now. He's a brother. And this is real life. I'll give y'all real, all the stuff I'm talking about is real life examples. And the thing is, you gotta, am I doing some of these same things? Do I have some of these same mindsets? Do I have some of these same biases, etc.? These are the conversations you have to have. Because if we don't have these conversations, nothing will change. The technology will change, and we'll be more and more addicted to our phones, spending less and less time with the people we love and care about, but we, as a society, will not change. And that's the deeper conversation we have to have. And we have to understand, what are these things that we're holding on to from our past, from that journal entry that guy wrote back in 1865, that we haven't let go of, that continue to hold us back as a society. And I have to keep saying the word society, because a lot of people are like, well, I am an individual. I am an individual. Well, let me tell you, if you are a real individual, you speak your own individual language. If you were an individual, you make all your own individual clothes. If you were an individual, you have your own individual religion. Now, some of y'all might have that, and I'm not going to judge you, all right? But we are a society where we do have some unique things within us, but collectively we work together to build the communities upon which we live in. And so when somebody says, I'm an individual, you wouldn't go very far as an individual, because nobody can build a house alone. And I mean that figuratively, as a societal house, and literally as a house. House probably, one person trying to, it'll be a long time for that house to get built. And it'll probably be a mud hut. Now, so, I'm not going to spend much time talking about fair housing laws, but again, I have to bring this point home, especially as it relates to certain things. Again, I'm trying to make the connection here. So, Fair Housing Act passed April 11th, 1968. So anybody know what led to the passing of that law? All right, I'm gonna give you a clue. It's the number one answer for Black History quiz questions. It's the first thing that came to your mind. Come on. Yeah, I feel well. Yeah, that's exactly what came to your mind. So, fair housing law, which made it illegal to discriminate, was passed because Martin Luther King died April 4th, 1968. And the fair housing law was made it illegal just from one of the last civil rights bill, 1968. Very tumultuous year for our country. Was passed April 11th, 1968. Now, he was assassinated April 4th. City started to burn. City's on fire. People were protesting, how did a man of peace get assassinated, etc. So Lyndon Johnson moved forward. Something that had been stalled in Congress for 3 years, gets it passed in 7 days. Now, what's the big riff on Congress today? What is the complaint about Congress? They have about a 13% approval rating. So, what's the big complaint?
How many hours do you have?
Well, what's the overall complaint? Good point, yeah. What's the overall complaint?
Nothing gets done.
Nothing gets done. That is the complaint. Everybody, that's the big, nothing is getting done. But somehow when cities on fire and people are upset, we can move pretty dang fast. And what else do I mean? I can fast forward to present day. When people worry about the economy getting shut down, all of a sudden we can give checks. Hey man, you should give people, oh no, we can't do that. Freeloading, no, we're not a welfare state. Oh man, hey y'all want some checks? We can move in times of emergency. But why can't we just do the right thing because it's the right reason? Why do we wait until things are on fire and we're worried about an economic collapse to do the right things? Why do we have to be motivated like that? Why do we have to wait until the brink to actually move forward on things that will help our country? And that's the big thing we have to think about. So, King actually worked in Chicago slums in 1966, and he lived in the slums of Chicago for 6 months, really trying to bring attention to fair housing. It wasn't just, oh, he stood up for civil rights. He actually really wanted to focus on fair housing and ending slums and the segregation, the jure, and de facto meaning just happening, like my Mexican-American employee who was being segregated to the east side of Des Moines because he'd be more comfortable there. And he wanted to bring attention to that. Now, ultimately, he didn't get the work that he wanted done, but the bill was passed in the thing. 7 days, it was done, the bill was done in 7 days, one of the fastest bills to ever get through Congress. But again, when we talk about housing discrimination, it's not just the effect that it has on the person, it's the effect that it has on society. People feel like they are being left out, blocked out, and denied opportunity. And those things linger much longer than you think. Again, I showed you the photo earlier from 1965 to 2015. People feel like they're being denied opportunity. And one of those opportunities is access to land, access to wealth, access to economic opportunity, which a lot of you hold the key to breaking through that gate, breaking through that opportunity. So, I want to talk about why it matters in Iowa. Because, again, I like to bring things, I like to be very serious. I don't like to talk, oh, diversity is great, it's wonderful. No, it's about economic, it's about opportunity. Somebody said it earlier, it's about opportunity. It is great, it is wonderful, yes. But it's wonderful for everybody. Because one of the key things we have to talk about during the Civil Rights Movement is the biggest beneficiary of the Civil Rights Movement was actually not black people. And I think it's sad at who the biggest two beneficiaries of the Civil Rights Movement?
White women.
That's number one, yes. They were denied opportunities, and then someone threw sex in as a joke to think, hey, we throw in sex, they definitely won't want to vote this Civil Rights bill in, and then it happened anyway. And white women, number one beneficiary of that. But then there's a second beneficiary. Business. Now you can't deny black money. And I'll tell you a quick story, but there was that one time where, hearing stories from I don't want to call them ancestors because they're still alive, my forerunners. But they were telling me stories about when they wanted to buy certain things in the South, they had to go north, either Cleveland, New York, Philadelphia, because they could walk in a jewelry store and say, boy, we don't acknowledge your money here. And so they actually have to literally go up north and buy certain cars and certain nice things because the people down south would literally deny them now, even though they had the money. Because they would say, you may have the money, but you ain't gonna never be equal to me. And so people literally, my family, my grandparents, my mom and dad, take a ride, go up north to buy certain things because they were being denied that opportunity in the South. Now the Civil Rights Movement comes in and say, you can't do that no more. And now you get billions upon billions of dollars thrown back into an economy, thrown back into a society. So inclusion matters in Iowa because, just in case y'all didn't know, y'all call it flyover state. So, you don't have a natural draw. There's no mountains, there's no oceans, for vegans, the food ain't that great. No kale cafes here. But, so, you need to make sure that you're actually tapping into the inclusion because people are actually not moving to the state. And there are certain jobs, and there are job gaps here that are being denied. So this comes from the Iowa Business Journal. Iowa ranks again in the bottom 6 for states with ethnic diversity of the population. Ultimately, the growth and the diversification of Iowa's population must be accelerated in both urban and rural communities to ensure continued economic growth for the state. If you want to be prosperous as a state, which also leads down to you individually, you gotta invest in other people and give them opportunities here. Home ownership opportunity, which builds wealth. Iowa's population continues to be outpaced by other states and still does not meet business growth needs. Iowa must capitalize on individuals' willingness to move to new locations and states as a result of the pandemic and a normalization of remote working opportunities. We've got to actually open the doors so that Iowa can be prosperous. Now, a lot of people say, well, hey, that's there. No. It affects inclusion and opportunity affects everyone. Because again, we are a capitalist economic society. And if the dollar ain't circulating, the state ain't moving, the city ain't moving. So, closing here, but I want to bring a few points home. So we talk about inequality. That's what we've been dealing with as a state, where they had affirmative action for certain groups of people up until the end of the 60s. And other people were being denied. Yeah, that's the system upon which we've been operating. Unequal access to opportunities. Now, we talk about equality, and that's evenly distributed tools and assistance. But there's a problem with equality, and the problem is if you don't correct the underlying problem, you can treat people equally, but they're still not getting access that they need and that they want. Now lately we've been talking about equity. Equity is a big buzzword, huge buzzword. It's about giving each community what they need in order to succeed. That's what we've been talking about. Now, but what's the problem here? Anyway, I see some people talking. You can speak out loud. Sorry.
Somebody has a head start. Tall ladder.
You said like two. Yeah. You got to pick. You say those together.
Yeah.
So you're saying somebody has a head start. Who has a head start?
Tall ladder.
Is that a head start? But you're not. Is that really a head start?
One person has a tree leaf more towards them.
All right. So more apples on one side. The tree is leaning towards them.
Taller ladder.
Taller ladder. And what happens with the person that's got it? What does the person who doesn't have a taller ladder do? That ain't fair. Man, taller ladder. That's not fair. I'll give you the best example I can give you. I was 8 years old at my grandmother's house with my brother Barr. My grandmother pours out 2 glasses of bright and early, which is black orange juice, orange drink, as we call it. So, and I had this small glass, my brother had the taller glass. And I'm like, Grandma, that's not fair. Byron has a bigger glass than me. Grandma, no, that ain't fair. Why Byron get the taller glass? And my grandma, without saying a word, she grabs another glass that looks just like my brother, put it down, take my juice, pour it in. And guess what happened? Same amount. The same amount. And a lot of people who make this claim, well, that's not fair. Well, sir, do you need that? Well, no, I don't need it, but it's not fair. You don't even need it. You complain about something you don't even need access to. We're trying to create a society. We're trying to build a better society. But we so focused on the ladder, we don't notice that the apple's still hanging over here. It benefit the other person more. So even equity doesn't fix the problem, because the biggest problem is what in this photo?
Access.
Now they have access.
Well, I mean, the quantity.
The quantity.
Yeah. Access.
But the tree is a representation of what? Thank you. A system. Society. We gotta go and fix the tree. That's what we have to go and fix. Once we change the system, the society upon which we operate, then everybody can have the same ladder and access to the same amount of things. But again, we keep talking about, well, if the parent, I just saw an article yesterday. This is the perfect example. There was an article yesterday that talks about how Gen Z, people essentially 26 and younger, are more depressed, more lonely than they have ever been. And they say one of the biggest causes of that need for therapy, that need for mental health, etc., is the fact that they aren't having dinner with their families. But the article said Gen Z is lonelier than ever, and it's the fault of the parents. Now, but is Gen Z just one family? No, that's a whole society of people living. So it ain't the fault of the parents, it's the fault of society. That is not a fault of it's the parents' fault. It's not the parents' fault. Show of hands of people who are only raised by their parents and nobody else had an influence in their life in any shape, form, or fashion. Thank you. We all play a role in this. I hate when the parents, especially the chief of police, just do that. It's the parents. Like, Chief, were you only raised by your parents? No. We are a society where everyone builds influence. Teachers, aunties, cousins, uncles. That one annoying neighbor that keeps telling you to stay off their grass. This is a society that we live in. And when we try to just say, what's the parents' fault? Well, there's like, there are about 300 million families. That's a societal issue that we have to address. Not go to each doctor. Please have dinner with your kids. Thank you. Now, I mean, we're going to be in this a long time. We deal like this on the individual level. We got to get to the root of the issue. So, we have to talk about culture. And what kind of culture are we trying? Is it an inclusive culture? Is it a culture that leaves certain people in and certain people out? So, one of the last thing I'll say is, culture is so invisible that if you don't focus on that, you won't really recognize what it is. And culture just influences us in so many different ways. It's the way we do life. We don't even have to speak culture because it comes through in how we interact, how we talk to each other, how we dress, etc. And we have to talk about that. What kind of culture do we have in the United States? If the culture will let certain people in who pass certain tests and leaves other people out? Some would say yes, and I'll put myself in there. People are like, well, what about you, Joshua? You've had these director jobs, you've been voted top down. But again, I've had to live around people of European descent my whole life. I know how to adopt and adapt. I didn't wear a tie today, don't judge me for that. But I know how to adopt and adapt. But we have to talk about culture. What kind of culture do we have? What kind of culture do we have as real estate agents? What is the culture of real estate offices and agents when it comes to non-Europeans seeking housing here in the United States, here in Ames, Iowa, here in Central Iowa? What is our culture? Do we give them and show them all of the opportunities out there? Or do we try to sway them to certain sides of town, not tell them about certain things? That's a question you have to answer for yourself. What is this culture that what is this culture that we have? Because some cultures, especially in organizations, have a very exclusive culture where there's only one way to, and it's all about me. There's only one way to address something, either or thing. There's a scarcity mentality where we don't believe that there's enough for everybody. That we're defensive, we can't admit when we're wrong. That there's secrecy. And in housing, there can be secrecy. But we have to start telling the truth. We have to start talking about truth over politeness. Understanding there's more than one way to address an issue. We have to start thinking in collaboration and cooperation. We have to also be humble. Be humble enough to admit when we're wrong. A lot of people say the United States is the greatest country in the world. And I say, have you lived in all 240-something countries? No. Why can you make that statement? I've lived in a few countries, they're actually pretty nice. I'm not saying they were the greatest, but they were pretty nice. Different from the United States, but they all had their own unique niceness. And on the happiness index, you have to score very low. The greatest. Education, we actually score very low. I mean, we have to think, why do we make these statements? And not even question the statements that we make. Especially if we haven't lived in all 240-something countries in the world. So, let King talk one more time.
I have dreamed today.
I must confess that that dream that I had that day has in many points turned into a nightmare. Now, I'm not one to lose hope. I keep on hoping. I still have faith in the future. But I've had to analyze many things over the last few years, and I would say over the last few months. I've gone through a lot of soul-searching and agonizing moments. And I've come to see that we have many more difficult days ahead, and some of the old optimism was a little superficial, and now it must be tempered with a solid realism.
Tempered with a solid realism. Now again, this was something he gave 4 years after the I Have a Dream speech. Again, he didn't descend off into heaven. He was still here on earth. And he's saying that his dream had become a nightmare because it was very superficial. Many people, there's another great video with James Barr of CORE and C.T. Vivian of Martin Luther King's organization and Malcolm X. They're having this debate and they're talking and they're like, well, you know, and this is like 1963, and they're like, I think we'll be done with this in 5 years, then I can go golfing. And then they fast forward 30 years, Malcolm X is dead. And James Farmer and C.T. Vivian are still alive. And they're like, yeah, we messed this up. We didn't understand how deep-seated racism was in this country. Malcolm X was right. And I was like, y'all crazy. This thing is really deep. This ain't gonna happen in 5, 10 years. We got some real issues here. I'm like, yeah, we really overshot this. And that's probably what part of that superficial thing that King talked about and how his dream would become a nightmare. And he talked about solid real, we have to get real. Talk about real things, talk about real issues. And it's okay to dream as long as your dream is based in reality. It's okay to dream as long as your dream is based in reality. You know, my brother always wanted to be a singer, and he actually could sing very well. But he spent all his time in South Carolina. You want to be a singer, you got to go to New York, maybe Broadway. That's what you want to be. You got to based in reality. And if you're not dealing with things as they really are, you're not dealing with reality, how can you hope to change things? So, yes, racism is bad, but there is much more than just saying the N-word and people in hoods, because again, we live in a capitalist country where the dollar is king. So if you aren't showing people housing opportunities, if you're denying them and not giving them the whole gamut, trying to steer them to one side versus another, if you're engaging in hiring discrimination, discriminatory lending, all of that is racism. And you might not even know that you're consciously doing it. It's just that when you see certain people, you get a visceral reaction of come right on in, and the other reaction is, yeah, sorry, we're closing in about 1 hour. Yeah, I don't have time to show you anything. I don't have time to talk to you. I'm really busy. And we have to have these harder conversations of how are we gatekeeping some people in and other people out. And if we're not having those deeper conversations, not just racist jokes, racial slurs, burning crosses, but even thought-terminating cliches such as, we're just one human family. It sounds good, but it ain't true in all aspects. So, I'll give you one more video and we're done. Something I want you to think about. All right. No! All right, now, show this one first. He got real deep, they showed us some TikTok, what? All right, now, I want you to just imagine for a moment that this was you. And you're going upstairs, this guy is Valentine's Day. You're going up, this happened, you pop the balloon in the door, you drop the flowers down again, the chocolate is just all on the floor. Now, you're going upstairs to see your significant other. And you got these busted flowers, balloon that doesn't float, and dirty chocolate. Now let's imagine the person you're with a loving person, who I saw in this case, you're sitting there not as loving. But this is about you're going to go upstairs with this, and what is your significant other going to say? It's the thought that counts. That's exactly what your significant other is going to say. Oh, baby, you try. So sweet. They go, do a selfie. Go, my baby, try. Hashtag still love. All right, so. Now, let's reverse the scene. Let's imagine instead, it's not Valentine's Day, but your mother sent you off to get some groceries. And instead, you now have a busted bottle of juice. The eggs fell over and they're broken. You mashed up the bread. Your mom said you get milk, bread, juice, and eggs. All you got is a cart. You go upstairs, you're like, hey mom, I'm home. Like, what's your mother gonna say? Keep it PG, what's your mother gonna say?
We'll be happy.
She's not gonna be happy. And what's she probably gonna make you do? Go right back to the store and do it right. That's what mom's gonna do. Mom is gonna say, I sent you to do something. Yeah, I need you to do it. So I'm like, look, I knew I should have. You should do mine. That's all. Because mother wants the results, not the lover. And when we talking about living in a society, family ain't about the thought. Because technically, as Americans, we're all family. We're kinmen. We're kin in some shape or form. We need the results. My brother couldn't go to the store and drop my pizza and man, I tried, man. He would actually try. So, material things, that's about material things, man. I'm hungry. We actually got to put in the effort. Because just in case you didn't know, you can't spell satisfaction without action. It's the last part of the word. You want to feel, you got to actually put some work in. And even going back to the lover, I couldn't live off the fact that I came in with floor chocolate and busted balloons for 6 months. Baby, remember that time I tried to get you? You still on that? Look, I need some. What have you done for me lately? That won't work. We got to put in the work to actually change things, to actually reverse the course. But the problem is when we talk about change, everybody, yeah, I want change. But nobody actually wants to change. And you have to be willing to change and evolve with the times. You can't really be stuck on yesteryear or what you did 3 months ago. You actually have to be willing to put in the change and understand that you can't have societal justice without economic justice. And you all, as realtors, hold the door to economic justice and economic opportunity in this country. And if you don't understand that, you don't understand racism, you don't understand why things haven't changed. So I thank you for your time. I'm free to answer questions, but that is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much. Let's try to help people get over those barriers and get over those walls so they can land safely into an accepting society. Thank you very much.
Anyone have questions for Joshua? We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I just want to make a comment to bring it home to all of y'all because I've lived in Ames since 1991. I remember in 2009 I was in my Central office in Ames, Iowa, our old office there, and somebody from another company who's a realtor here in town, still practices, walked into our Central office on our old office on South 16th Street, and he owns several rental properties, and he said to my face, "I don't rent to blacks and Hispanics," okay? And Sharon Nelson, you all know Sharon Nelson if you were been long enough, she was present. Her daughter Sherry Timms was also present, and Jay Morgan, who's also left real estate, they were all present. And he said that to me, and said, "I don't rent to blacks and Hispanics in my rental properties." One of my really good friends I grew up with, right here in Ames, Iowa, in fact, they actually live in this area. This is when I was about 20 years old, 20 years ago, I'm 40 now. I was looking at one of the apartments that their dad owns, and they wanted to rent an apartment, and they said to me, "Our dad doesn't rent to blacks and Hispanics and Asians." And these are my friends. I applied for a job at a restaurant multiple times. I never got hired. Manager went on vacation. I came back while he was on vacation, applied for the job with the guy I went to high school with, Adam Clark, and he hired me. General manager comes back from vacation. He sees me working there, and I applied there 5 different times. He's like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "Adam hired me." About 3 years later, he said to my face, my boss, Papa John's, "You know why I didn't hire you all those years?" I go, "What?" Because you're black. I don't hire blacks. So I can go on and on and on about things I've experienced in this town. I sold a house in Arizona Avenue a few years ago. Before we closed, on my way to the closing, I was calling to the Great Western Bank. The listing agent called me, Linda Swanson, and said the neighbor across the street, who my clients were buying the house from, called her and ripped her a new one because Linda let black people buy the house in Ames, Iowa, in Arizona. So if you don't think racism exists today or in Ames, Iowa, and I've done this question before from some of the people here, go, "Wow, is there racism in Ames? Ames is such a diverse place, you know, we have all these different races." Ames is, I've been held at gunpoint twice by Ames police for doing nothing wrong. They searched my 8-year-old sister and patted her down in her private part because she had guns on her. So I can go on and on about this crap, but this stuff does happen in Ames. I've lived around white people my entire life. 90% of my friends are Caucasians. So my ex-wife's is white. My ex-wife's family, my ex-wife is black, and her family, she was adopted by white people. So I've been here around it. I can tell you it happens. It's been said to my face. I've been called nigger many times. People driving by calling me nigger as they go by in their car. They don't know me, but they just want to say, "Nigger!" So I can go on and on, but I'm going to stop there. But it does happen. It does happen in Ames, Iowa. And I know Brenda asked me Brenda and Vicky asked me, "Okay, seriously in Ames, Iowa?" And I just started laughing. I'm like, "Really?" Yeah, it's everywhere. It's not just on TV or in Missouri. That's all I'll say.
Thank you very much, Baba.
Yep.
Those of you that have children, I think, growing up here, you see this a lot. Obviously some things are happening in our schools right now, here, Ames, Iowa. We can make a change. It is possible. It can start with each one of you. This was a very important speaker for me personally to have come in. I was very moved when I heard him speak the first time. And I said, I want you to tell your message. I want you to present to my members because you bring this in a different way that people need to hear. So thank you all for coming. I would like Jen Stanborough, she's our RVP from the Iowa Association of Realtors. I'd like her just to tell a little bit about her position here with the Iowa Association, and then we will do our